Welcome to the show, everybody. This is a really terrific episode, and one of the only ones that I've had 3 guests, I believe. So I really liked the dynamic. I'm going to start potentially looking into, we'll see how it works out logistically, but sometimes trying to have multiple guests more often and have turn it into more of a round table discussion, at least just to mix it up from time to time. And so, yeah, always experimenting. I think you're going to like this a lot. If you want to support the show, this ad-free content is 100% supported by you, Patreon members. Go to patreon.com/Shane Mauss. We do regular game nights and group overshares. Just had a terrific one, talking all about just what's been on a bunch of our, got I think 10 of us together and chatted about just different things that were on our minds lately, and it was super fun. It's always so nice to meet the people that listen to this show. It's people that are into learning new things and learning about science, and so it's a pretty cool community. So I hope you'll join it and join the Discord and everything else over on Patreon. Enjoy today's episode.
Are we?
Yes.
Where are we?
Here.
Why are we here? Not entirely clear. We are misfits thrust into existence by random chance, with no hints at all as to how we're supposed to make sense of it all. It's immensely bizarre. Here we are.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Shane Mauss. Joining me today, this is the first ever 4-person Here We Are podcast, I believe, if my memory is serving me correctly. I think I've had two guests on several times before. I don't think I've ever had 3. This is a special occasion. It only happens once every 17 years or so. I have my one return guest on the show is actually the most popular guest on the show. He's been on more than any other guest. But people love hearing from him. We always have a great positive response. And so anytime some sort of insect thing comes up in the news, which I'm sure if you're an entomologist is every day, but permeates through the culture and is making big headlines, I always reach out to Barrett and say, who you got? Who's interesting in this field? So I reached out to Barrett Klein, who works at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. He is a professor of evolutionary biology, right?
Let's say animal behavior and entomology.
But
evolution's at the core of all biology.
That's what you do. And yeah, so he's back. We're actually just going to have everyone kind of introduce themselves. So Barrett, for the people that haven't seen you on the show before, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am an entomologist, really interested in sleep and social insects, honeybees, paper wasps, and others. But my ventures take me into scientific visualization, how visuals affect science, and cultural entomology, how insects affect humans and human culture throughout history. And that means I meet a lot of really fascinating people, and I'm so excited that I was able to help lure in 2 great friends of mine, Joseph Yoon from Brooklyn Bugs and Gene Kritsky, world authority on cicadas.
And this is another unusual thing. I think this is the first time it's ever happened on the show. Gene showed up, and I was like, Gene, is that scotch that you're drinking in the afternoon? And as a joke, because I was like, surely that's just a scotch-looking thing with ice in it. And he's like, yep, sure is. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we're all drinking now. So this is an especially fun episode of Here We Are.
If my dean is listening, it's iced tea.
We're having this is a special event. This is a special year. If you're into cicadas, I mean, this is a real celebratory time for you guys. Gene, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, Shane, it's a pleasure to be here. And Barrett, good to see you again.
Yes.
And Joseph, nice to meet you as well. I'm Gene Kritsky. I'm a North Dakota native. I'm a second-generation American. My grandparents homesteaded in North Dakota in the year 1900. So that's something that a very few people can say at this time in the world. Undergraduate work at Indiana University, where I was the student of Dr. Frank Young. He was the entomologist hired to replace Alfred C. Kinsey. For those of you who know Kinsey of the Sex Institute, he was also an entomologist, worked on gall wasps, and then he got really into sex. But that's not unusual for entomologists, and so because it has to do with
I mean, is there any more interesting sex out there in all of Earth than in entomology? I would say that. Probably not.
It runs the gambit. And then I did my PhD work at the University of Illinois with Louis Stannard. And both Frank was the cicada specialist for Indiana. Louis Stannard was the cicada specialist for Illinois. And while there, I got to be very close friends with Monty Lloyd at the University of Chicago and Hank Dybus at the University at the Field Museum of Natural History. I met Tom Moore. I'm sort of that bridge between all the early 20th century and the people that are coming up now between in the cicada lineage. But I work on primarily periodical cicadas. I've written several papers and 2 books on honeybees, mostly honeybees and the history of the beehive, beekeeping in ancient Egypt. I have written I have over 250 publications, from everything from the history of science to straight evolution to cultural entomology. Barrett and I share that as a very strong interest. And I also teach a number of courses, including not only entomology and evolution. And Barrett's right, evolution is the core of what we do in biology. I also teach a course in dinosaur biology.
I didn't know that.
I'm extremely fond of dinosaurs. And to bring this full circle, my good friend George Bernard Jr. up in Oregon, he and I co-described a 110-million-year-old cicada nymph that crawled out of that tree and fell in a slop of amber, and was not amber, but sap, and was preserved in amber. And it's nice to know that during the time of the ancestors of the tyrannosaurs, that cicadas were singing in the forests of Southeast Asia.
How much?
When the American Museum of Natural History built their Kosai dinosaur exhibit in Columbus, they put cicadas in it. So
excellent.
Amazing.
Now, Gene, do we know exactly what that cicada might have sounded like? Because, there's that Jurassic recording from an orthopteran, a jumping insect, that they recreated because they had the morphology to do so.
No, we do. Yeah, we can't do that with it because it's essentially a 1 minute old first instar nymph.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So, unfortunately, we can't.
Bummer. Can I ask you a question? I've actually never talked about dinosaurs on the show before, which is Barrett's told me is a tragedy. And travesty. And but my impression, not knowing anything about dinosaurs, was it just a pool of amber back then? Like, I feel like everything was just falling in it all the time.
Not really. It's basically it collected in little nooks and crannies at the base of the tree in many cases, and it just happens to fall in there. But it happened over billions of years.
Amazing.
And these trees that produce the amber sap produce lots of sap. I mean, that's not just a little drop here and there like we see in our pine trees, for example, or our conifers. This was gobs of this stuff sort of flowing out and collecting in little pools. And then it breaks up, and in the process of preservation, it also gets redeposited. And that's what makes the little nodules that are picked up in the little amber pieces that are then polished.
Fascinating. So, Joseph Yoon, tell us about yourself and what is Brooklyn Bugs?
Hey, everybody. I am so happy to be here. And Brooklyn Bugs, we are edible insect ambassadors. We work to raise awareness and appreciation for edible insects and help explain why the UN's FAO endorses them to address food security and sustainability. But the idea of just changing your diet and eating something that has such an extreme visceral reaction is a bit of a reach. And so we love to work interdisciplinarily with artists and musicians and writers and creatives to help employ the fine arts and visual arts and creative arts in order to translate this idea and messaging to help to normalize it and really get people to realize that the majority of the world's nations are already eating insects. It's smart food. It can be delicious. So what are we missing out on? So that's a big part of what we are doing. And I think it's just so fortunate that we've been able to tour around and work with a lot of different museums and universities. And so we're looking forward to hopefully resuming our global tour later this year and definitely next year.
Can I caution you away from the slogan for whatever restaurant you guys make of using the slogan, "It can be delicious."
Thank you. Yes, right. It is delicious, right? Well, the reasoning is that people presume that insects are going to taste gross. And so when I say it can be delicious, it's because they think they just automatically presume it's going to be gross.
Right.
And so they're a bit, but you're absolutely right. I should actually rephrase that from now on. Maybe. Thank
well,
you.
it is.
A lot of onions and garlic.
Yeah.
It can be palatable.
Well, that is, when you bring that up, it's such a tricky thing because so much of we've talked on the show before of so much of taste has much less to do with the tongue and taste buds than what your average person would assume, what it consciously feels like, and so much more of it is the presentation and the atmosphere and the story that the chef's telling about it, and everything else all leads into the experience of enjoying it. And you know, like the I don't know, there's studies where they put like red dye and white wine and have sommeliers describe it, and they use words typically associated with red wine when describing the taste of it and just that sort of thing. So I think that and this kind of gets into cultural entomology, which you guys are all into, which is that's in a culture where this is, I would say, probably 98% of people are kind of maybe naturally off put by the idea of eating insects, are unfamiliar with it.
Oh no, your numbers are way off, Shane.
You think it's higher?
No, far lower than that. And I think that there are
really?
a lot of wild presumptions made because to you're gonna have to excuse that to white America. Because Anglo-Westerners have a very narrow view, and eating is very culturally, there's like a cultural status associated with eating. And unfortunately, the Anglo-Western world have stigmatized the act of eating insects. And I
Right.
preface Anglo-Western because Native Americans were eating insects way before we were here. And so it'd be erroneous for me to say what the Western world.
Right.
So I would say that for
all right, 98% of white people. Can we?
No, I would even drop that down to like 90% because there are the new self-coined foodies out there that love trying new food and experiences. Plus, you have to think about all the people that are concerned about the environmentalism and sustainability. And so when you clump those two groups together, I'm going to say that 20 to 25% of Americans are at least open to the idea when actually presented with insects as food.
Open? That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in Brooklyn too, which is like a little bit of a echo chamber of it's like Barrett and I are in Wisconsin, and I think it's like
where I've been. I got a grant to work at UW-Madison and also Montana State, Purdue University, IUPUI, a lot of Midwestern states that invite me, who you think of as cattle and pork country. So why would they invite someone working with edible insects to go and talk? It's fascinating. And
that's encouraging to hear. I'm a fan. I've eaten insects in Barrett's lab. I'm into it. I want more people eating insects. I think that the majority of people have never even like heard of that as an idea. I don't know. It just seems like a little bit of a tough sell sometimes.
Well, it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to educate and outreach and work on our outreach, because if you didn't know how to eat a garlic and Barrett was like, Shane, I love garlic, you got to try it. And you go, okay. And you just pop a clove before he tells you how to eat it. You'll be like, oh my God, this is repulsive. How do you love this?
Oh.
And Barrett's like, wait.
Yeah.
You're supposed to cook it. And then you let out the natural sugars and it's so delicious. And that's the thing, is that Americans still are eating essentially raw garlic. We have not learned how to cook with it, how to present it as food, how to integrate it into our food, and about the functionality of insect protein. And so even if you're eating it at Barrett's lab, with all respect to Barrett's culinary acumen, I don't know whether or not that's a fair way to judge 𝕊𝕐𝕗 and like what the possibilities are with it.
For sure. I'm 100%. And listen, I mean, I'll eat an oyster and like... zooming out, there's not much grosser than eating an oyster if you're detached from the experience of it being that's what I'm saying. If you take something like an oyster and present it like, well, this is in a fancy restaurant in this expensive thing that you're putting, people are like, ooh, I guess I'll have this boogery thing slide down my throat. It's all that I'm trying to say is presentation is kind of important, and there's a lot of unnecessary mistaken mental barriers that people have from enjoying insects, which they should.
If they just realize most people like honey, and if they realize where it's been.
yeah, that's a very good point.
And Gene, especially Waldhonig or forest honey, which is coming not from the nectar of flowers, but from the excreta of true bugs.
Yeah.
Well, Gene, you bring up a great point, because I was quoted on NPR. I was like, what's so weird about eating insect protein if we already eat insect regurgitation?
Yeah.
Like, really, at the end of the day, it's like you think, and oysters filter hundreds of gallons of water. And then we like ruthlessly just shuck them while they're alive and slurp them down when they're alive. I mean, come on. There's,
Yeah, in my ecology class, one of my test questions has always been: you're eating a live oyster on the half shell. Are you acting as a carnivore, herbivore, or detritivore? Defend your answer.
What was that last word?
Detritivore.
What's that?
They feed off of decaying matter.
Oh.
And so, and it turns out it's all three.
Wow.
Oysters are decaying matter?
They're eating. They've got decaying matter in their. They're processing it.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
That's it.
Right.
So it depends. You take the whole thing. You're eating the whole animal. You're not eating just a little bit of it. You're not cutting off taking the thigh meat off a chicken. You're eating it all.
Yeah.
All the organs, everything.
You guys want to get philosophical? What do you think ethically? I don't know if I should just present what my opinion is and my bias in terms of you're caring about eating a thing that has feelings or something like that, right? Do you eat the mussel and the oyster, or do you have insects? Because I would say that that having a brain means that's more ethically taboo than something that's just like a filter in the ocean. Thoughts, questions, concerns. By the way, I eat meat, but just curious.
Well, I think more than oysters, if you look at mammals and livestock, then we're putting a comparison with like brains and brains. And a greater neurological system, more receptors to pain. And I also am an omnivore. I mean, I'm a chef. I almost have to eat everything, and my curiosity demands that I do. But I've lowered my meat intake drastically since I've started my work with insect protein. We all have to make certain decisions in our life about where we find the threshold. And when people see a packaged good in their grocery in some like styrofoam container, and it's like what they associate as their delicious steak, but not process and think about the whole cattle and the whole process of what their life was prior to it ending up in that form. There's a lot of consideration there. I put great respect into where our food comes from, a great value in that as well. And so while I still do eat everything, I try to be as responsible as I can and really limit the amount of red meat that I personally eat.
Yeah, I eat everything as well. I've had this conversation with vegan friends where I'm like, well, can't you eat oyster? Like, it doesn't have a nervous system. It's not like if your issue is like suffering or whatever. And then related, when I talk with the many, like 350 different scientists or whatever that I've had on the show, insect studies, very easy to get clearance from. You can pull wings off. You can like do kind of whatever you want. Not so much with critters and mammals and such. But it's I don't know, just an interesting thought.
Darwin wrote that all animal life kills, and people that are worried about killing life. And I have my good friend Dr. Muckerhide, Sister of Charity, made a comment once. She's life is life is life. Every time you shower, you're killing millions of bacteria. Your belly button has around what is they I think what the numbers like 1,800 different species of bacteria live in the human navel. And 1,100 of them are new to science. I'm taking this quote from a professor at the University of North Carolina. He says, like the rainforest in there. And every time
in
you
the
shower,
belly button?
you're in the belly button.
That's why I don't touch it. I just let it be. I don't look in there. I don't think about it. I don't wash it.
When people ask you why you're in the shower so long, you got a new excuse, Shane.
And you got about 600 to 800 species of bacteria living in the crook of your arm and your elbow, where it bends. So if you shower today, you killed life. You brush your teeth today, you killed life. And now it's not a high, the higher grouping of life as we were talking about with a central nervous system, but we do kill. We kill all the time.
I'm 1,000% in agreement with you. I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were on that. If you've been, I imagine you'd been asked before.
Of course, we're all drawing our lines in arbitrary ways, right, in the sand.
Right.
And in the case of bivalves, like any mollusk does have a nervous system. So if you go by just having nerve cells and a system, whether or not there's a central nervous system with a compartmentalized brain, is that a line you draw? If you see My Octopus Teacher, the documentary, do you then discontinue eating octopuses because you see how amazing they are at problem solving?
I had just become fond of grilled octopus right before seeing that documentary. I'm like, that kind of soured the experience. But yeah, all of these various things, for better or worse, or whether they actually are a true reflection of reality or what's ethical or what that even means, they do influence what we take in and our perception of food and everything else.
You know what? One thing that I had to sort of come to grips with is that I probably collected more cicada, Gene, you're going to have to excuse me because I just say brood X because it's so much cooler to say than brood 10.
Yeah.
So excuse me. I've
Sorry, what's that word mean?
Well, I say brood X and technically it's brood 10. But I've been saying brood X just all over the place. But I've probably collected more brood X than anyone in the world. And I've also collected them. I've probably collected hundreds, over 100,000 of them, and it's serious because I as I'm collecting them, I mean they're so beautiful. I have so much respect for how amazing, magical, and beautiful they are, and so there has to be a great purpose. There has to be conviction and belief in what I do in order for me to collect hundreds of thousands of these incredible creatures. And so that there was, I had to come to terms with myself and believe in my mission and my work and celebrate that the world has collectively never spoken more about eating insects than right now at this very present moment. And it's really to kind of tackle larger issues that we have, not today, but really for future generations. And what kind of problems are we going to leave for them? What kind of solutions will we leave for them? And I think that insects will ultimately unlock a big answer to where we get our food. And the fact that we were able to be a part of the global zeitgeist for like months. I would see articles of my friends and colleagues in newspapers and on the TV like every day. And it's like, wow, we are not just pushing the needle right now on the interest in entomology, in conservation, in the life of insects, and on edible insects. We have smashed that needle like never before, and it is just fascinating. And so it's like, yes, I believe in my work. And so that's what allowed me to capture and essentially euthanize so many of these incredible cicadas.
Well, this is
the one contrast to that, if I can, is it was in the 1890s, the USDA said that brood 10 was going to go extinct in time. They repeated that in 1919. And the research that Frank Young and I did in 87 in northern Indiana, found a significant decline in their population. Northwest Ohio, now half the counties have lost periodical cicadas because of deforestation, not because of eating.
Yeah.
But they've got
of course.
Thank you for that clarification.
They clear cut so much forest that there's these little pockets that the population they were producing is now gone. And even though it sounds crazy, brood 11 went extinct in 1954. That was a major emergence in 1699 and 1716. I've got firsthand accounts I published in my book, Periodical Cicadas, The Plague and the Puzzle. And the last living brood 11 cicada found was in 1937. And so since then, people have gone back and looked. And of course, that disappeared not because of eating, but it disappeared because of clear cutting. It was just outside of Boston, clear cutting, urbanization, getting wood, cutting timber for wood, for building materials. Every time you put a interstate in, you cut through some swath of forest land in the Midwest, in the eastern deciduous forest, that's going to fraction, sort of, if you will, pocket or create little pockets of cicada habitat, which is constantly being encroached upon.
And what were some of the consequences of brood 11 going extinct? What happens then?
Well, in fact, that's one of the interesting things. If all the periodical cicadas disappeared, the forest will still be here.
Right.
They do a lot of ecological good. They turn over a lot of soil while they're immatures. The holes they produce when they come out of the ground are like a natural aeration for the soil. And here in the Midwest, with these hot, dry summers we're getting, those holes persist all summer long. So when it does rain, instead of all that water running off the surface, goes down into the holes and helps water the trees. The food pulse that's provided when they come out in these numbers. And Joseph knows what that food pulse is all about. I mean, it's enormous. Even things like squirrels, which are primarily herbivores, I've been watching them for the last 2 weeks, eating on, don't forget these plant matter over here. I'm going to eat this delicious cicada. And that is beneficial in helping some populations actually recover from impacts of the past. And so on. The female laying her eggs in the trees makes the trees look like they've been hit by a hailstorm. But there was a wonderful article published in 1869 in the original American Entomologist. It was titled, "Out of Evil Cometh Good." And it was in 1869. In 1869, the year after brood 10 and brood 19 came out simultaneously, orchardists in Missouri and in Illinois were saying, we are having a bumper crop of our fruit trees. And they realized all these trees had been naturally pruned by the cicada egg laying, which caused some of the branches to break off. And the flower set the next year, the leaf set, was enormous. So that was beneficial. Then they all die. Yeah. And as they die, they rot. And for those of us here, we're smelling that now, by the way. I'm inside, so I'm not smelling it this minute. But those nutrients go into the soil and form this wonderful nutrient cache around these trees where the carcasses have collected. And that helps sustain the tree and the cicadas that are sucking on that tree root.
So it's just winning the lottery for the ecosystem every time that they come around.
It provides an opportunity for things to recover. We have the emerald ash borer wiping out 16 billion ash trees in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And these pockets of open spaces are now being filled in, and we're finding predominantly mostly maples filling in these spaces. So the forest is changing, but it provided an opportunity for other things to come into these spaces. And more maple winged fruits are being produced to help get into those spaces because of cicadas.
So if I could back up a little bit, brass tacks, why you're here in the first place? So like you said, it's been happening for months, media coverage everywhere. I don't follow media stuff much, so I'm usually always a little slow and behind on what's going on in the news. But I'm more sane because of that. But I have so this is without knowing a terrible amount about cicadas. This is kind of Joe, what you were alluding to. This is kind of the Halley's Comet for astronomers or whatever. Every time Halley's Comet comes around, if you're an astronomer, you're getting a call, you're taking interviews, people are buying telescopes, and this is kind of you're seeing that needle move. And so what happened with cicadas recently? Let's do a little 101 for people that also live in a cave like myself and just don't even know what a cicada is, don't know why they made the news recently. Why don't we do a little 101? Yeah, Barrett.
I think I should start with the origin of cicadas. And this
Perfect.
comes from Socrates through Plato. Are you ready? The story goes that the cicadas used to be human beings who lived before the birth of the Muses. When the Muses were born and song was created for the first time, some of the people of that time were so overwhelmed with the pleasure of singing that they forgot to eat or drink. So they died without even realizing it. It is from them that the race of the cicadas came into being, and as a gift from the Muses, they have no need of nourishment once they are born. Instead, they immediately burst into song without food or drink until it is time for them to die. After they die, they go to the Muses and tell each one of them which mortals have honored her.
Wow, so that's where they all started.
That's where they came from, more or less.
Wait, you said that was Socrates that wrote that?
Well, Socrates didn't have any surviving writings as far as I know, so it's through Plato, through a translator.
Through Plato's, yeah.
So a couple...
Pardon my ignorance, geez, thinking that Socrates wrote anything.
A couple steps removed.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm happy to riff on some cicadas, but I mean, I'll let the entomologist go first since that's their area. Yes.
It might be important to also cite the first literary inclusion of cicadas, and that's from the Iliad. They sat there on the tower, these Trojan elders, like cicadas perched up on a forest branch, chirping soft, delicate sounds. Seeing Helen approach the tower, they commented softly to each other. Their words had wings. But Gene, maybe we should go in a more biological direction right now.
Well, we can look at the first time.
Barrett.
The first time periodical cicadas were recorded by Europeans. Now, the indigenous peoples of the Americas knew about them for centuries, for thousands of years. But there's a piece written by the second governor of Plymouth Colony, who was the first person to write down the occurrence of the cicadas. He wrote it occurred in 1634, although he got the date wrong on his in his book. He put 1633 at the top of the history. It's from the history of Plymouth plantation.
I'm glad to know people have been doing that for a long time, forgetting to change the year on the checkbook, sort of.
Yeah, it's and if you read this, he's got all these things, then they're out of chronological order for the year. Oh, by the way, anyway, he wrote, and the spring before, especially all the month of May, there was such a quantity of a great sort of flies, like for bigness to wasps or bumblebees, which came out of holes in the ground and replenished all the woods and ate the green things and made such a constant yelling noise as made all the woods ring of them and ready to deaf the hearers. They have not by the English been heard or seen before or since. But the Indians told them the sickness would follow. And so it did in June, July, August, and the chief heat of summer. That's the first observation. Now, he started writing. He wrote the first 10 chapters by 1630, and then went back and edited and added things in. That's what happened. Why he put it in the wrong place. He stopped writing in 1650. And if they did emerge in 1633, they would have emerged in 1650, but he didn't. The next year in 1651 is when they should have emerged. That's the brood that's still in Plymouth Colony to this day. And so he'd stopped writing a year before. So it's like if they had come out again, he should have mentioned that, you would think. But now to take that one step further, the first
Gene,
mention...
Real quickly, why do you think that he thought that they were eating green vegetation? Because we know they don't. Two, what do you think the sickness was that followed? Because we know that they don't carry any disease or pestilence.
That's right. Eating the green things is because the leaves turn brown when the female laid her eggs.
Oh, yes, right.
And the sickness was basically what we now think is that it was an influenza and other disease brought by the Europeans that afflicted the indigenous peoples because they didn't have that immune reaction to it.
Blame the periodical cicadas.
It was like the
the escape bug.
That's right.
It was like the 5G towers in COVID sort of situation. They like happened kind of around the same time. Must be a connection there.
Now you'll notice at this time he didn't call them locusts. In fact,
he called them that before, though, right?
They were never called locusts until the first time brood 10 was recorded, which was in 1715, and that's when Andreas Sandel wrote in his diary this record, and the church where he preached is still standing in Philadelphia. And I haven't received it. I have hope that the cicadas would still emerge around the church because that's the brood 10 mothership. Yeah.
What? I'm gonna go the next month to go. I didn't make any plans for it, but I am now. If that's the mothership of brood 10, I am gonna go. Yes.
Look for wings and look for skins because the last those you'll be able to find in a month for sure. But no one has sent me anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say likewise. I've put out all my reaches and fields. I've been contacting everyone I know in any cicada, anywhere where the emergence occurs, asking for like field sightings, reportings, what's going on? Do they hear it? Do they see it? And in Philadelphia, I've sadly heard of nothing.
Oh wow! Well, I designed and then helped create the app Cicada Safari, and we now have 196,000 downloads of the app. And we now have in our possession.
I'm sorry. What is this for the listeners?
It's a free phone app called Cicada Safari, which encourages people to go download this app and go out on your own cicada safari. If you see a periodical cicada, you take its picture and you submit it via the app. And then I have 25 colleagues that help look at every single photograph, and we have a map now of where brood 10 is, and we as of today have 560,000 photographs from this year alone.
It's a font of information.
Look at every single picture.
We've looked at every picture.
Amazing.
And of those,
do you ever get sick of looking at cicada pictures? Like when you're a cook at Taco Bell, you can't eat it anymore.
A beautiful cicada is like a beautiful woman. Especially when your wife is out there helping you collect. It's just amazing.
I remember hanging out with Robert Trivers in Jamaica, if you know him, evolutionary biologist and studies lizards, and he's showing me these lizards, and he's showing me this picture on his phone. He's like, "Oh, look at this one. This is a real hot female here." He had like a real eye for what turns on the lizards and what men were the hunky ones and stuff. Do you develop like that sort of relationship with the cicada, like which ones are going to do real well mating and just by looking?
Shane, you would love to know this real quick factoid. As surely as you can tell the difference between a male and female, you can tell the difference in a female or male cicada. Mm-hmm. The look is so obvious that you just take one glance and it's like, well, on the underside, not from the top side necessarily, right? I don't think you can tell from the top side, but when you look on the bottom, you could clearly tell the ovipositor.
Yeah, you've got to look at the. That's it. You've got to look at the naughty bits.
Yeah, right,
That's
like
it.
this.
No other sexual dimorphism. No size difference. No advertising in the males. Nothing. Just got to look at the bits, huh?
Yep.
How do they know?
How do they know, Gene?
Well, the male calls, the female is silent, and so the male's calling, and the female responds by flicking her wings in response. And unless it's a fungus infected male cicada, that's the ideal way for cicadas to tell apart. And then once they're close enough together and they're doing their mating call, we do know things like a study number that took mated pairs and compared the average size of the male of those successfully mating cicadas with the entire population, found that the mating males were actually a little larger than the overall population. So
size matters.
And important to note for the audience, so that if you do flip the male and look at the venter, you've got these large plate-like structures called tymbals, and they vibrate rapidly. And there's a resonating chamber below, a hollow area. So the whole body creates this.
This is why you watch on YouTube, audience.
There you go. Oh, and to the fungus, Gene, this is a good segue to talk about why 13 years? Why 17 years? So of the 3,335 described species of cicadas, we have 7. And they're only in the East United States that are periodical. And
well, it's now been we've got 2 more that have been found that are periodical. There is an 8-year cicada in Fiji and a 4-year cicada in India.
Really?
What? They're not prime numbered cicada periodicals?
No.
Fools.
Gene, can you send
predators are going to be able to predict every 4 to 8 years. It's so easy. Come on.
Gene, could you
got to throw a
papers?
13 at me, a 17.
Sure.
Throw me off a little bit.
Oh, that's good to know. So now potentially 9 species or so, right? And
yeah, but again, they're periodical, but they're not in the U.S. The 7 species we have in the U.S. are endemic to the U.S.
Now, what's really interesting is with those 8 and 9 years, is that correct? Or 8 and 4 years?
8 and 4, yeah.
Neither are prime numbers, and they're
That's
smaller
strange.
durations in time. So the 2 hypotheses that tend to be presented with respect to or trying to explain
we
away
better explain
these
to
13 and
people why
17.
we're talking about prime numbers right now.
Maybe we should present those hypotheses and then place these 8 and 4 year new periodical cicadas in
And
context.
might I also say one thing, just moving forward, just for my own, just so I know, are all entomologists this passionate about what they do, or do I have a sampling error where Barrett's an enthusiastic person and tends to gravitate toward other enthusiastic people?
What if I
Or is
said
it an
the 3 of us
entomology
are
thing?
dullards in the context of the world of entomology? I'd be shocked to meet an unpassionate
entomologist. I mean, they are aliens living amongst us. They're endlessly fast. I was paddleboarding just yesterday. I had some fly land on me that had a slightly different wing color than I'd seen before. Some species had never landed on me before. And I was like, wow, flies are it just takes seeing something a little bit different to be reminded of how amazing life is. And then it bit me, of course, but...
and it became all the more amazing.
Cicadas don't bite, by the way, Shane, just so none of your audience members think that
although they can
were ever
poke you with a proboscis.
Yes, indeed. And that could kind of stick and kind of feel like they're pinching you or something. But
a little warning poke.
Yeah. Right,
yeah. Because males have that with a lot of insects, right? Where they can kind of poke at you, scare you, you think you're going to get
actually, a number
stung.
of Hymenoptera, the bees, wasps, ants, the males can give sort of that warning turning up of the 3rd segment of the body in almost a stinging postural state. But it's just...
Yeah, because who's going to call that bluff? No one.
An entomologist.
No one.
So males can't sting because stingers are modified egg-laying devices.
So let's talk about math. Let's get into the theory of cicadas and
Sure.
their rhythms and prime numbers. It's great. I wasn't doing cicada research. I was just reading a book about geometry and came across this fun little tidbit.
Well, we've got two life cycles, 13-year and 17-year. They're both prime numbers. The leading hypothesis right now, if you look at how they originate, if you look at the distribution of the two life cycles, the 17-year cicadas are north, 13-year cicadas are south. And we know from some wonderful work by Teji Soto et al., we now have some more molecular data on their evolution. The common ancestor of the genus Magicicada, 3.9 million years ago, diverged into one large species and one small species. The small species then diverged 2.5 million years ago into two small species. That gives you our three species groups. When I talk about species groups, both the 13 and the 17-year cicadas, there's a 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕟𝕒 for 17 years and 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕟 for 13 years. Their calls are very similar. They look very similar, although the 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕒 has a slightly different coloration on the underside of the abdomen. Then there's 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒, which looks just like 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕒, and the calls are very similar, but they're all three about the same length and size. But so we call all three of those the 𝕊𝕒𝕒 because their calls so similar and their patterns tend to be alike. So that's a little background. We have the same thing going on with the other two species. There are a 17 to 13-year forms, calls very similar. The leading hypothesis is that the periodical cicadas evolved from evolved their 13-year life cycle first. It evolved in the refugia south of the ice sheets during the glaciation. And one of the ideas is that the longer life cycle evolved in response to this very hazardous time period. And it looks like they've got genetic switches that can trigger 4 years of development. 13 and 17 are 4 years apart. But I've got 13-year cicadas that came out after 9 years, and we've got 17-year cicadas that came after 21 years. Some 17-year cicadas will come out 4 years earlier than 13 years. That there's a genetic switch that can trigger 4 years, which, by the way, there's your 8 and 4. And so the mathematical model would be n times 4 plus 1 for the northern periodical cicadas. The others would be just n times 4.
Interesting.
Now, of course, what really gets this thing squirrely is you've got the retreat of the glaciers 4 times during the last 3.5 million years. So we've got what happened most recently, not more than 20 miles north of where I'm sitting right now, was the extent of the last ice age. It was just north of Cincinnati. That was 20,000 years ago. By 14,000 years ago, it had retreated up to north of Toledo. As it retreated, the forest came in and moved slowly northward, and the cicadas came with it. And so the thought is that if you can switch these life cycles by this 4 years, is it warm enough to come out in 13 years? No, it might be too cold. You're a little close to the ice sheet. You hold on and try another 4 years later, which in 4 years, how much did it retreat? Was that enough to be more? And so that might be that's been suggested, the trigger between the 13 and 17-year groups. But we do know there's some fluidity. Brood 10 here came out 4 years ago in massive numbers. And when Brood 10 comes, those that come out after 21 years, it's going to be inside at the same time as Brood 14, and we can't tell them apart. They don't wear little numbers on their back, so it's kind of rough in that way.
They don't wear numbers on their backs.
How did you identify it in the beginning then? That you said you were able to tell genetically that even though it came out 4 years later, how did you know it was Brood 10 and not the Brood 4 years later?
It depends on if you've got an area where Brood 10 occurs and no other cicadas occur in that area.
Oh. Okay.
And it comes out in an area where nowhere else. This, for example, Eastern Ohio is predominantly Brood 5. And so when Brood 5 came out, it had an acceleration the last go around and came out during Brood 1. There are no Brood 1 cicadas known in that eastern half of Ohio. So the only population it can come from is 5. And so back to their evolution, 2.5 million years ago, now you got 3 species. In the last 300,000 years is when the broods evolved. And in some cases, the broods might have evolved just in the last 25, 30,000 years. So they're almost instantaneous, evolutionarily speaking. That's not 20,000 years is nothing for their evolution. So so when you bring in this geological model, it really helps. You look at where the cicadas are in Ohio compared to where Brood 10, let's say, is in Pennsylvania, and you can see the influence of where the ice sheets were. How far did they go south? And now they're responding to life in this interwarming period between the ice ages. And we know that, for example, here in Ohio, brood 14 is adjacent to brood 10. 14 is getting smaller over the last 200 years. 10 is getting bigger. They're accelerating slowly to come out 4 years early. Now we have instances now in Southwest Ohio with we've actually observed in the last 34 years where brood 10 cicadas came out 4 years ahead of schedule. They all didn't get eaten. And to the year 2000, 5 locations had enough cicadas that sang, mated, and reproduced. 13 years later, a few hundred came out. They all got eaten. 17 years after the year 2000, they came out in massive numbers again, joined by more accelerating cicadas, and we now have 33 locations in Southwest Ohio where they're singing, mating, and reproducing. We've actually seen the origin of a new population of brood 6 cicadas. And so it's what's sort of neat now that there's so much interest in periodical cicadas, and we've got the news media helping us, and we've got things like the apps and whatever. We are now seeing these secrets that the cicadas have held on. It makes sense when you see there's 2 life cycles, they're 4 years apart. You see these patterns out the eastern U.S. brood 9s adjacent to 5, adjacent to 1. There's something that's consistent going on here. Now that we've seen the formation of a new population in Southwest Ohio, it's clear these accelerations. And then why would that be beneficial? Did I anticipate your question, Barrett?
Yeah. So you've suggested the possible origin of the trait. Now let's talk about maintenance of the trait, if indeed it is.
The maintenance. Monty Lloyd, the great cicada worker who from the University of Chicago, had a hypothesis, and he and I did some experiments on it. We didn't get to complete because before he passed away, but we found anecdotal evidence to suggest this is the case. When you come out 4 years early, you may get out of sync with the fungus. And so old established popular broods may have higher incidences of fungus if some of those cicadas, I think of as people, some of those cicadas shift, they can get lower infection rates. Well, that's the next thing we need to study on that. On that.
And can I add that apparently now I have to talk to my mycologist colleagues, those who study fungi, but apparently that single fungus is the longest lived fungus, lasting the 17 years necessary to wait out the next opportunistically arrival or emergence of, say, brood 10. So this is an amazing thing. Is this long duration out of the picture and a prime number the key ingredients to preventing predators or parasites from, say, matching your life cycles?
One of the suggestions, we always thought that it was too long, that there's no intermediate steps that a predator or parasite could evolve to match, to live sustained by periodical cicadas. Turn that around.
Hold on one second. Just because Joseph, what are you trying to show us here?
Oh yes. So this is the 𝕊𝕐𝕗 fungus, and you could see that the yellow fungus has eaten the yellow white substance, has eaten the bottom of this cicada, and it still is very, very much alive until who knows how long, and it just loses its entire it continues to lose its body mass and just continues to try to mate, thereby continuing to spread the fungus. And it has compounds similar to psilocybin and amphetamines, which kind of help it to continue on.
So it's tripping and on speed, essentially.
What a way to go.
Wow.
After 17 years of being underground, you have your first vision as an adult, and then shabang.
I mean, even adventurous humans usually don't mix psychedelics and speed.
Yeah, no, it's so far out what the correlation between this fungus and with the cicadas. I mean, what a marvel in nature, really.
Yeah. Although what's the fungus, the relation with the 17 and 13 years, and why the prime number may not be important is that if this is such a way to get out of sync with all your specialized predators, why is it only the periodical cicadas that are doing it? And so that's some of the discussion on the other side of the coin.
I think that brings up Shane's point earlier that they're aliens.
Well,
but Gene, you could.
I mean, there are a few things out there that are a specialty in a species that just nothing else has stumbled upon ever. And what a long time to wait. I mean, there's a cost involved there of waiting that long of things happening, and as you're dormant, the ice sheets or whatever else wiping you out, right? That's a tremendous cost to be dormant for
they're
13,
not
17
they're
years.
not dormant, Shane, to be clear. They're eating down there.
Okay.
And the idea that they're in diapause is or hibernating is incorrect.
Oh, I see.
And
Thank you.
they're actually quite active, but working with a very slow metabolism because they're eating the xylem, which has like very little nutritional value, which allows them to like just slow live this 17-year time period. But I'd love to know if either Barrett or Gene, what do we know about their lives underground for this whole period of time besides sucking on plant xylem?
Can I?
Well, you go for it, Barrett.
Well, I just wanted to go back to the idea that if you're somehow you must be touching on Shane's point, conferring some fitness benefits with these long durations underground, because what is the alternative? The alternative is to have shorter or faster generation times, faster turnovers, so that by a numbers game, other species of cicadas may be deemed more successful on some metric. So the prime number, I feel like, except for these 8 and 4 years that you're mentioning, may play a role for what we haven't mentioned, and that is this idea, the second potentially competing hypothesis, maybe non-mutually exclusive hypothesis, that it at least limits the amount of potential hybridization that would occur with a periodical cicada and another cicada, where you might potentially reproduce and those offspring would not carry the beneficial traits of the periodical cicada. Is that right? Because you would have to match, even if, say, you're a cicada that has a 3-year life cycle, you're not going to hit that 13 years or 17 years, and you're going to limit not only predators and parasites, but potentially hybridization potential with immatures in the other life cycles.
Of course, with the annual cicadas and the periodical cicadas come out earlier than the annual cicadas. So you'd also have to shift when they come out in the year for them to hybridize. It's like the cicada killer wasp comes out with the annual cicadas. And I'm sure there have been instances in the past where some Johnny-come-lately cicada came out, was still around, let's say July the 5th to the 10th, and a cicada killer wasp got it. But it's relatively rare, actually quite rare, because right now there's no cicada killer wasps out yet, but the cicadas are the periodical cicadas are dwindling rapidly.
Have you seen the picture of the annual and periodical together this year? Because of the cold snaps that we've had? Yeah,
and right now they start emerging early. We had some come out about 3-4 weeks ago in the southern states, in particular, Georgia, and we are right now. We've had I probably say very few of any photographs at all of them together in the same area. But we have a lot of photographs of annuals, and so that's one of the reasons why we got to catch those. In Cicada Safari, we can approve a photograph as an annual cicada or a periodical cicada. And so we're generating maps of those, although it's not our main focus. But people love cicadas. So we have people reporting cicadas out throughout the year. We've had reports from several countries, South Africa, Thailand, Australia, of cicadas coming out in those areas. But we really focus this big number on the periodical.
I would love not only to hear Gene's response to Joseph's question about what's happening underground, but first I'd love to hear what Gene was about to say in terms of these long durations and sustaining predators or parasites within a 13-year or 17-year period.
Well, one of the difficulties, go ahead, you want to add more to that?
Yeah, so is it that you have variation in the trait, and some come out a year early or a year late?
Some do come out early, a year early and a year late, but too few to survive.
Okay.
Variably, we had here in Cincinnati probably about 150 reports versus 9,000 this year of cicadas, and it was isolated ones here and there. No singing. They're all being eaten. On the other hand, we had 4-year early cicadas come out last year in Chicago, all the way from Evansville across Chicago to Bolingbrook, and tens of places where they were singing, mating, and laying eggs. So now we've laid the groundwork for a new population of brood 9 to come out in, let's see, that'd be 2037.
So it's worth noting that it's important, even though you have these very predictable, protracted periods of emergence by these species, since natural selection, as defined by Charles Darwin, really needs to have variation in a heritable trait. To have that year early or year late appearance might be their saving grace in a bad year.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And it's not, and they can persist. So, for example, if indeed brood 10 evolved from an accelerating brood 14, they're both still with us. 14, those it occurs in fewer areas than brood 10, and so it doesn't happen overnight. If you, I did a paper for the Indian Academy of Sciences a few years ago where I looked at all the historical records of cicadas in Indiana, and I found a pattern that would suggest it would take about three to 4 centuries for a brood to literally totally shift to another brood by 4-year acceleration.
Huh.
But we have in Indiana cases where a large number of brood 14 cicadas a century ago, now just about 20 counties or so, 16, 20 counties have it, whereas brood 10 then also a century ago it was in every county, and now we see brood 10 missing in about 15% of the counties or so. And now brood 6 is popping up. And so if you take how many years does that happen to go through all that, it takes about 300 to 400 years for that to actually take place. And so this may have been going on constantly, and it may be a long-term response to this fungus that hangs around as spores in the soil for 17 years.
Fascinating.
I think you kind of already answered for me the question I was going to ask, but you were talking earlier about, I'm still curious to hear the take on it, just because we like talking about evolution on the show. And when you were talking about 2 million years ago or whatever, when the size split and there was a smaller and larger one that took off, when something like that happens, how slowly, and I think you kind of answered it by saying you're seeing it happen slowly now, but how does it happen in small steps, or are there these instances within insect like this where you're having like punctuated equilibriums where it's just the female or whatever gives birth to some species gives birth to both like the small and the large, and the small don't get eaten by predators as much, and the large are like really sexy, like look at that ass, that's amazing. And those two small and large ones just really take off, and the middle ones become old news. Does that happen really quickly? I mean, quickly is a relative term, I suppose, but how, or does it happen a little more gradually where something gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger, or is it more of like a mutant?
In nature, forgetting about urban areas, the periodical cicadas are adapted to different areas of the natural world. You find the large decimal species like upland woods, oaks, and what have you. Cassinite, for example, loves the floodplain. And so you could have had an event where you have the species here, and then once you have a change of where's the forest, because they need the forest to live. That could have been part of this isolating mechanism as they adapt to the conditions. Like again, Monty Lloyd, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, wrote a paper, "Why are cicadas more common in the city?" All 3 species occur in the city, and we have what is a cicada looking for when she wants to lay her eggs? She's looking for a tree, usually in full sunlight, surrounded by low vegetation, because they feed on grass roots for the first few weeks or the roots of small herbaceous vegetarian for the first few weeks. And then by New Year's Day, they're 8 to 12 inches below the surface. We are in urban areas, in our cemeteries, our churchyards, our schoolyards, any place where you got trees surrounded by low grass, creating the ideal habitat for periodical cicadas. And all three species are merging in and are choosing these areas. First of all, it's disturbed. That Cassini likes that. Could be an old oak tree, but that's next to the other trees. We're seeing these things. They'll fly up to a mile per emergence. And so I've watched a natural area. One of my sites is a cemetery in western Cincinnati. And there's this one center circular upland on the top of a bluff graveyard cemetery section. It's almost all decim. About 40 yards away is a grove of Bradford pears, all Cassini. Those Bradford pears are planted like before 3 emergencies ago, probably back in 1970 or so. And the surrounding area, Cassini flew into the Bradford pears. Sept and decim stayed around the oaks. This year I was I found a few Cassini flying into the oaks. I found a couple of Sept and decim trying out the Bradford pear, but in nature they tend to segregate. And so you're asking, how does this occur naturally? If we look at their evolutionary past, each of the 3 species was adapted to a slightly different ecological framework, if you will, and we've just screwed it up by what we've done to the world. And that's what helps add a little complexity to our.
And what about the when you said that they like sunlight? Is artificial light drawing them towards city life?
Not so. They don't do. They do not do a lot of spreading in the evenings. It's the female's looking for a tree that's going to survive 17 years. And so Monty thought that's going to be a tree. There's going to be a guaranteed of solar energy. So you're going to find a lot of these where they on the edge of the forest where they've caught all the trees, but they're all whatever the favored tree, and they've laid their eggs in over 200 species of woody plants. So it's not like they've got one favorite and they're going to go there. We are creating ideal cicada habitat, which may be the refuge that saves them in the future.
Gene, have you ever considered trying to rear any cicadas, or do we know any instance where people have tried to rear the periodical cicadas?
Yes. In many cases, what people did was they would actually take egg nests, and Monty Lloyd did this back in 1982, and I helped him gather some of the data from 1999. Basically, you take large number of egg nests, and he did this in 1982. It was a really neat experiment. Took all these egg nests from the Cleveland area, from Brood 5, and he took them to Sioux City, Iowa, where cicadas do not occur. And he describes in his notes holding softball-sized mounds of cicada nymphs and then creating plots and spreading them in specific plots. And they came up 17 years later. Back further, Charles Marlett, who's the person that came up with the numbering system for brood numbers and what have you, he did that in Washington, D.C. He took egg nests and put them in his backyard and watched them come up 13 years later.
When you say egg nests, what do you mean exactly? Like digging up?
You basically go to the tree and you clip off the end where the female is oviposited, put them in a vial of water. We know from an experiment done by Moses Bartram, the son of John Bartram. He in 1766 experimented with the cicada eggs. And he let some of them drop, and during the flagging, some of the branches that have eggs related drop to the ground. And if you let them drop to the ground and they dry up, the eggs will die. If they fall on the ground, or if you leave them on the tree, or you put them in a vial of water, or you stick them in the soil, the eggs will hatch. And so he was able to. So what Marlett did was basically keep these egg nests, cut off the egg where the eggs were laid in the tree, kept them moist, put them in the backyard.
Wait, why
that
would the
is a
eggs
patient person, don't you think? Like if you're a pet owner and you're gonna get into the cicada game, you really gotta, and then you have to imagine too, when that 13, 17 years rolls around, you're excited to tell people. You're sending out invites like a year or two before. You're sending out save the dates to come check out what you've done. And then what if it's a dud? What if the firework doesn't go off? How disappointing.
I will say that the first time Monty tried that, he forgot to go back 17 years later to check.
Oh,
this was the year.
Man, you forgot. This was before Google Calendar. You gotta set. You set the alert for an hour before, a day before, 2 days before, a year before, 2 years before. You gotta.
But every year you have to have an alarm go.
Yes. My first long-term experiment, I started in 1991, and I couldn't, I had to verify that 9 years later. It was the prediction that I made that we'd have an acceleration of brood 10. And then in 2001, when I found that we had a 13-year cicada, some of my colleagues didn't believe that it was real, so we had to wait 13 years for that. And then the question was, those cicadas that came in the year 2000, would they say 13-year or 17-year? So I had to wait till 2013 and 2017 to find the answer.
Yeah.
Now, if I worked on fruit flies, I'd have this done in 3 months.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
But no, I have to work on cicadas.
Well, Gene, you know what's,
that gives you time to think. It gives you time to ponder, to think about what's going on. It's like the insected version of a baseball game.
Yeah.
We have time to say, hey, I want a hot dog, and you're not missing anything. It's not like basketball where don't have time, you're afraid to leave. But it gives you time to think and ponder. And
that's my kind of job. I want to work cicada security starting next year.
I was actually gonna bring up cicadas and bring it out to Long Island where they are going extinct. And when I talked to various people about it, I wish I had spoken with Eugene, because I was discouraged from doing so because it could bolster the rat population, or it could have negative effects in a place like New York.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh gosh, like what if I brought up cicada nymphs and then they started and then they succeeded in Long Island. And then rats emerged as well, and then they carried some disease, and then something happened, and I was like the point of that. So I was talked out of doing so, but I wish I had just done it.
Well, that would have been in 2038. They might not have remembered you were the culprit.
Well, I would have, because I would have kept my digital calendar. Yeah.
I think what you do is if you're a real planner, what you do is you plan the birth of your firstborn child around the cicadas. That's when you plant the cicadas. You're gonna have to keep it. You're gonna have to put some frost on or something around the 13-year mark, so they they know to stay in another 4 years, and then you have a heck of a graduation party.
You
have a whole adult in the time that it takes for them to come out.
Joseph,
Amazing.
you do not want to be the person who brought the gypsy moth from Europe to the United States to get some silk out of it.
And that's why I refrained from doing so, but I am thinking about trying to get more experimental. The reason why I asked about the underground life of the nymphs is like, can we trigger their response to shorten the year in a controlled lab situation where we can maybe trick them to come out in like 3 years, a periodical, for example, or
for periodicals that wouldn't work. Apparently, they only molt 4 times during the 17-year period underground, but they keep track of time by monitoring the fluid flow of the xylem tissue. During the winter months, when the trees are in their dormant stage, there's very little fluid flow in that xylem. But when the spring comes and the flower and the buds form and the leaves start coming out and the flowers hit, it can detect that. And we have good experimental work. Rich Carbon did this in a greenhouse where he was able to overtop trees and get cicadas to come out early. Here in Cincinnati, in December 2006 and January 2007, we had one of the most incredible, wonderful, snowless time. Our highs were reaching 65 degrees for several weeks. And I remember my maples started to bud, leaves started to form. And then in February, we had this hard freeze. All these things dropped. I remember it because I had to rake leaves twice a year. That was terrible. So then April, and true spring comes, and the trees budded again. They formed their leaves, their flowers, a whole bit. And where brood 14 was expected to come out in 2008, thousands came out in 2007, a year early. So they counted 2 years that year. And so what we know how that we know that they're counting. That's what they're triggering on. What we don't know is how do they remember the count?
Yeah.
Well,
fascinating.
Isn't it not terribly uncommon for in developmental stages of insects or even like lots of different things to kind of have environmental triggers where you have like a hormone of a predator, of a fish that gets recognized by the eggs that then triggers it to hatch early or to pick up and go or do some other thing to avoid that is like a really nuanced little what would it be, like an epigenetic mechanism? Maybe not epigenetic, but just an environmental trigger.
Well, one of the issues that we're talking about is that a 17-year cicada, by the time they're 13 years old, they're in their last instar. That's the last stage. They're not going to molt again until they emerge from the ground. So they're fully grown at year 13. And 17-year cicadas can be at that point after 9 years. So it takes a long time to get there. You could probably take a 17-year cicada, and if you could figure out a way of popping it out early, that appears to be what happens for these early accelerations. Is we have these the leading idea that we have is that we're going to have one of these mild winters with 2 fluid flows in 1 year, and that triggers an extra molt within the first 5 years. What we know about what they're doing underground growth-wise is that 13-year cicadas molt an extra time in the first 5 years compared to 17-year cicadas.
Okay, Gene.
And so when these cicadas that I looked at in 1991 were growing faster than I expected, based on what the model was saying, I thought that they were coming out early, and they did. So that was a 17-year cicada that, for whatever reason, molted extra, and that's probably related to our milder winters. Yes, Barrett.
Gene, what if you took first instar nymphs of either 13 or 17-year cicadas, and this is getting at Joseph's and Shane's subtle questions, brought them into the lab, and you had false plants delivering xylem like crazy? Could you affect juvenile hormone levels such that they would molt much more quickly? And then within 2 years to 3 years, you have your 17-year cicada. And then you could actually do a PhD project on periodical cicadas.
That is a lightning fast cicada. Wow.
The issue there's some factors we don't have control over. For example, periodical cicadas have this endosymbiotic relationship with bacteria. That there's 2 to 3 species that the cicada doesn't have the genome to do everything it needs to do to survive. It depends on these bacteria, but they can't survive without the cicada. And so you've got these things all adapted to this nutrient-poor diet, metabolizing these things to produce another cicada. It's more than it's not just speeding up the cicada. We got to speed up the bacteria to do this as well.
The bacteria, are they, for example, making tryptophan or another amino acid available to the cicada, an essential amino acid?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about all the biochemistry.
Okay.
But it's an endosymbiotic relationship that's critical for the survival of the periodical cicadas, and we're just getting a lot of work's being done on that with a number of people in Montana and at Chris Hyman's lab in Connecticut.
And you think that the bacteria couldn't be sustained with a quick generation time to complement the cicadas, very slow, relatively slow?
It's just another factor. Okay. We don't know. It's just another variable in there, and we know that the mortality underground is high. For example, I would estimate under a couple of these trees that's in this one cemetery, at its peak in 2004, we counted 356 holes per square meter.
What?
350.
That sounds like just like having a whole hole. Like how can you have that many pinky sized holes in a meter? That sounds crazy.
At a certain point, that Swiss cheese isn't cheese anymore. It's just a hole.
You just have a full moon at that point.
Now let's do the math here. I got my iPhone calculator. 356 per square meter, and each female will produce around 500, a little more than 500 eggs. I had a student count several hundred of these things. That means that little 1 square meter, assuming a 50-50 sex ratio will be responsible for the production of 89,000 eggs. Now, the area under just one of these trees, under one of those trees, I estimated that there were the equivalent of around 7,000 cicadas emerged. And assuming, again, that we have a 50-50 male-female ratio, is 311,500,000 eggs under that one tree.
Is anyone else a little disappointed Gene didn't do the math in his head?
I think he did, actually, Joseph. I think he did.
It was just for
it's
show,
his own
right?
humility that he brought out a calculator.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a bogus calculator. So, Gene, we're talking about egg mortality mostly, right? And then...
Yeah, we're looking, that's how many, the 300, let's say just round numbers, 300 million eggs were laid.
Wow.
We know that if it flags, that'll kill half of them if they turn brown. So let's take that. So we're at 311. Now we're at 150 something. We're over 100 million, and yet the average number of adults that came out would be about 7,000. That gives you an idea of how the underground mortality is incredible. Because if they turn and go, they only move about a meter in their entire life underground, and so if they go one way and the roots that way, the roots the other way, they're done.
Gene, do we know?
And there's other things.
Do we know the relative mortality of, say, annual or 3-year cicadas?
No, because when you dig up the nymphs, we're not sure how long ago they were.
Okay.
We can tell later. We can tell we can tell you how many eggs are in each one. We can tell you how whether a nymph is an annual or a periodical later in the life stage of the annual. They're a little rounder and more robust. But because
I know,
without doing DNA work,
I know that in Shane's mind,
difficult.
He's wondering, should I be an annual cicada, 3-year cicada, 13-year cicada, 4-year, 8-year, 17-year? What are my chances?
That's
It could
a
be a
tough,
global
I mean,
tour.
if you get to pick, which you might not, we know that after this life you do reincarnate as a cicada. We know that much, but we don't know yet if you get to pick which one you get to be.
We don't have a choice as to which one we reincarnate.
Yeah. I mean, that would explain human population if that were true, because then all these people who've lived throughout time, that all the entire human population would have to reincarnate into something. Cicadas, there are more cicadas on the periodical cicadas on the earth this year than the human population.
Soul. Yeah.
So it's sort of like it just keeps growing. You may have come up with found something that we're not really thought about. That's pretty good.
Well, you guys have an appetite to talk a little bit about
food,
eating cicadas.
Absolutely.
I was actually that was my next question, was because we're nearing. I don't have a particular time frame, but I always like to be mindful of my guests' time, and we've had a fun discussion, so I don't want to sour it by making it go on for too long. I'm happy to hear any other cicada stuff that you guys have, but I did want to transition back into Brooklyn bugs and eat. I want to hear about. First off, I do want to hear about eating cicadas, but then generally, Joseph, I just want to hear, next time I'm in Brooklyn, I get through New York once in a while, I'm in Brooklyn, I want to hear about like a perfect meal for that, that I should check out when I'm in town. I want to eat a bunch of insects.
I would say the perfect meal would be at potentially, if we time it, would be a meal that I curate for you, a tasting menu.
Really?
Yeah, which that really would be the finest way, and something that I really
have the show. It's the perks. It's the VIP treatment.
Well, I am hoping to go back to Wisconsin. I'm still in contact with Barrett and other professors and colleagues that I know at UW
we should all get together.
And I actually got interviewed with WSSU, the Madison's radio station, college radio station, and so I'm hoping to make a visit out there. But I've had some startling and amazing discoveries with with insects and edible insects because of my work with cicadas. It's just over the past 2 months.
Hit me.
One, people somehow are more willing to eat insects than we realize. This blows your 2%, my 10%, 20% way out of the water, because there are so many instances of people in 15 states across America.
Joseph, if you think this is the first time someone's made a fool out of me on this show, I mean, you are not doing anything special here.
This is not to make a fool out of you at all.
This is every single episode.
So what's been really fascinating is, okay, so we have this like incredible magical phenom in the world where these magic cicada are coming out, brood 10, after 17 years. And so all of a sudden, this beautiful metaphor of us coming out of our global pandemic and coming out of social isolation and the emergence of the cicadas, that perfect metaphor allowed us to capture the larger imagination. So it's not just about like, oh, look at these incredible cicadas, but there's a perfect metaphor there, I think, that people really latched onto.
Were there any cicadas during the time when the other ones were supposed to be under that like came out and thought it was like spring break and wanted to party and do the all right?
Well, what I saw in early May was the first emergence, the first signs of emergence come out in the first week of May, shortly after May 6th was when I first started collecting cicadas. Then we had a cold spell, 2 of them in northeastern New York and New Jersey, where I was collecting mostly in Princeton. And they all went back underground. They were not seen again for like a period of 1 to 2 weeks. So that caused great concern for me and like a lot of my entomological colleagues. Were like, is there a concern? Because their whole strategy of predator satiation coming out en masse to overwhelm the predators, if they come out and emerge over a period of 2 or 3 times, does that defeat their whole evolutionary strategy of survival? Thankfully, they were horny and singing their little hearts out, and so we think that they're going to survive. Like they were really thriving.
You can always count on horniness.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, right.
And I was also going to say that is there, and this may be a question for everybody, is there a situation where like you're sending the like juveniles or something out first. You're sending the more foolish ones like, hey, go check it out there. See what it's like for us. Is there any mechanism? Because in a lot of species, there'll be like some bird that bullies some there'll be a hierarchy and the lower on the totem pole will kind of starve and not get to eat as much. And then when a predator comes by, they'll go underground. And then the starving one is forced to come out first to eat. And then if the predator's still around, they get swept up and fill the belly of the predator, and they know the predator's still out there. Is there anything like that going on with cicadas? Like, hey, let's get these guys out to test the waters first and see what happens.
The first ones to emerge are going to be the ones on the south-facing side of a tree with good sunlight. And even in that one tree, we've done it. It's that's usually it takes a full week before the ones on the north side of that same tree will start coming out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But actually, Shane's touching on an interesting point. Sorry to interrupt, Joseph. Just the idea of what kind of social dynamics happen in a truly solitary species that aggregates en masse. And so that could get into some really interesting questions below ground as well as above ground. Like, you're going to have differential size. Is there any kind of competition spatially in going for key areas of a root, for example?
Well, Monty did a lot of digging, and he found that, for example, brood 10 will go down to about 8 to 12 inches below the surface, and then brood 14 where they overlap will come down as well. For a couple of years, they're together at the same area, but then brood 10, as it ages, goes up a few more inches, so they actually segregate out if there's 2 in one area. And he always thought crowding might be the trigger that pushed a 4-year early acceleration, but it didn't seem like that from the data that I'd seen before that he'd gathered.
So going back to
Sorry, I want to go back to the food, and also
Yeah,
by
that's
the
what I was
way,
gonna go back to, yeah.
just to plant a seed of one thing that I will want to get to at some point is if there's like a insect kind of butter and or cheese situation that can happen. Any insects out there that we can milk, perhaps, I'm interested in. But anyway, I'll let you take the wheel.
I'll happily go back. But so the fascinating thing is like, okay, so we have all these people talking about eating cicadas that are crawling out of the ground after 17 years. So why is it so hard for humans, Americans, to accept the fact that we can sustainably farm and harvest insects for human consumption at FDA-approved facilities, right? So it takes us one step closer to the understanding. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, Shane, it's like we don't really know. And so that's why so much of my work is based on outreach and education, because Americans don't know how to think about insect protein.
Mm-hmm.
They still think about insects as a whole. And because they're so small, they just think about, oh, I don't want to eat the insect, the whole insect. But it's like, we don't think about eating a whole chicken or a whole cow, right? We think about things that are plated up nicely. We don't even talk about eating cow. We talk about eating beef and steak and hamburgers. So even in the terms of the vernacular, we need help. And so that's going back to the whole idea of the interdisciplinary call to action. When I'm on college tour, I'm actively recruiting these college students to join this fledgling industry that Barclays projects will grow from $796 million as of 2019 to $8 billion in 2030. We need everyone's help. We need people in English. We need business majors. We need engineers to help us create these new farms. We need entomologists. We need food scientists. So we need artists. Like, there is room for everyone to participate. So that's what's one of the big revelations for me during this brood, is that there are a lot more people, whether they knew it or not, because of the availability of the insects crawling out of the ground, that they're like, oh, let's try eating this. So, okay, how do we pivot and continue to work with this idea and grow this idea of insect protein in America? Something that's sustainable, something that's nutrient dense, something that provides a solution. And so that's where I could really use all of your helps collectively, even in just like kind of being able to share more of this message, like talking more about it amongst your colleagues, and even just being more open, because there are purportedly, you need 7 points of engagement to adopt a new idea. And so this could be one of them, Shane. Thank you so much for having me here. Barrett, thank you for your invite to be on the show. And Gene, for your expertise in helping us to understand what it is about the cicadas. So that was like number one of the big revelations with the brood, is the psychology of the acceptance and willingness of Americans to try this out with the availability.
Well, I will say that there's also a bit of scarcity going on there as well. That like you said, the needles moved and everything else. This is a once in a 13 or whatever 17 year opportunity to get to like an ant. Yeah, you know, I can try an ant next month. Cicada, you better get it while the getting's good. So that goes to the next point, is that, okay, so if we're willing to eat the insects coming out of the ground, then what about trying this whole variety, that the fact that there are over 2,000 types of edible insects with wildly different flavor profiles, different textures, different functionalities in the kitchen. And so when people are like, oh, I don't want to eat bugs because of the texture, I'm like, well, what texture is that you're talking about? And they're like, and they could say squishy or crunchy. And it's like, well, you know, the complete opposite is also available. Like, the texture thing doesn't really come through. And it's really the psychology. How do we get through to change a perception of insects being that creepy thing that bites you and that ruins your garden, to something that is sustainably farmed or harvested specifically for human consumption? And so it's not necessarily basing the entire body of the work that I'm doing or that the UN is endorsing to just eating cicadas, but to open that narrative, get that little light in the tunnel in the head where it's like, okay,
we just went through Brew 10, and this is the most I've ever said Brew 10 because of Gene. That shows a great amount of respect for you, sir, by the way. Ever. Like, I never even say Brew 10, ever. Like, all of my interviews, everything I've done, I've always said Brew X. But it just shows the interest and availability, because the availability was there. How do we break through that availability? It's not expecting people to go out and order. A lot of the insects that I get are available on Amazon. It's not expecting people to go out and order whole insects and to cook it for themselves. What we really need is to advance a policy and legislation to create incentives from the USDA to increase funding for cricket agriculture, for insect agriculture, so that there are incentives for farmers, so that we have more outreach and educational programming, and that we can start developing pre-made foods that people can take home from the refrigerated section or what have you and be able to heat up. It's like, oh, look at this delicious cicada mac and cheese. Look at this like amazing cricket fried rice, right? Yeah. And so once we get to that point where people can go like, okay, I've heard now over 10 times about eating insects. I now see it at my local grocery store or my co-op. Now I am ready to buy and try it out. So that's what we really need. It's like all hands on deck. And one really big factor that I love to bring up, and this is like a huge point, is that because edible insects are so extreme, people think in terms of extreme terms. Like, you're not going to take away my steak. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to take away your steak. I'm
trying to put some insects on that steak for you.
No, not put insects on it. But
come on,
increase.
No, you crusted.
I'm not a fan of that either. Actually, what I want to do.
Now who's judgmental about insect
I'm not personally a fan of it, but you're welcome to do it. What I want to do is add, not subtract. I'm trying to add, not take away.
Yeah, sure.
I want to add insect protein into your pantry, into your diet, where if even one of us, out of the four of us, were to include insect protein once a week, even that would have an impact on the environment.
Let me I'm big into marketing. Let me throw a few things, because first off, like I said, the scarcity that it's in the news is once a lifetime. You're going to get, you have like the lobster effect, where when lobster was abundant and it was like you'd feed it to prisoners were revolting. We can't eat any more lobster. Then you make
no
it
more
scarce,
sea bugs.
and now you have people paying. That's the highest price thing on the menu. You use that, and then you go, there's also, you have so I like, instead of sometimes delicious as your slogan, maybe instead highlight the variety of the flavor profile. If you can get a variety of a flavor profile from an insect that doesn't exist elsewhere, that's something marketable. And now let me tell you an easy one. The wellness folks. First off, they're suckers just generally. And two, they don't care about taste of things. In fact, the worse it tastes, the better, probably. Placebo effect. And then you have and you can package it, you can ship it, you put it in power bars. There has to be insect power bars that already exist.
That's like the largest market share, probably.
Yeah. Oh, man. And I'm not even saying you're a sucker if you're eating insect. I'm saying, like, if you want to hit as many different things as possible, because there's a lot of...
You're hitting the nail on the head, Shane, is that there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that's going to make everyone just go like, oh, like, this is a thing. And so we need to focus on all the different strategies and different food types and different marketing ideas, because it's not just one thing where people will all of a sudden go like, oh, wow. And so just keeping going.
Exactly.
Keep going. And that's really been a big part of what we've been what we've been doing for like 4.5 years now.
Because there's also like the Tabasco effect where people want to like, what's the hottest thing you can take? There's something like that going on with like oysters and other things where people are like I've eaten Rocky Mountain oysters before. If you ever find yourself dating a girl and meeting her family in Dallas for the first time, they will bully you into doing so. And to get them to shut up, you'll put a Rocky Mountain oyster in your mouth. And it'll
Hopefully
be
it was
the exact
fried and
experience.
crusted.
If you just close your eyes and imagine what it's like to bite down on a testicle, it's exactly, you're picturing it right. It's exactly what you think it is. And but you also have that kind of going on with insects as well, where there's a certain demographic that will eat them as a dare and then be like, well, actually, that was interesting. So there's so many different ways you can get into the insects, but what I'm mostly interested in is I'm a foodie. I want a fine dining, and it doesn't need to be all insects. It can be, like you said, just a side dish or something like that. I want the fine dining delicacy. This is a special event. I'm celebrating. What's the best, like, what's your favorite insect and your favorite way to prepare it? That's what I'm interested in.
Can I say that I've had the great privilege of being present at one of Brooklyn Bug's major events? And
you can say that.
The many entrees, appetizers that are...
You've been at 2 events, oh no, you were not at Madison, right? Oh no,
I
you
was,
were, but were you not at the dinner?
Yeah, I was at the big dinner.
Were you at the dinner?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but then you were also at the New York Hall of Science event.
That's right, of course. So
you were at 2 events.
Basically, it highlighted the variability. And now Joseph mentioned that 2,000 types of insects have traditionally or modern day been eaten, but with over 1 million described species of insects, imagine the potential, and it's really limitless, because if you can take one insect with all the different stages of development, as well as all the different ways that you could prepare, now extrapolate across the diversity.
My favorite insect of all time, does anyone want to guess for consumption?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it that delicious lemon-tasting ant?
No. Shane, Gene, either of you guys want to guess?
You want me to take a chance?
Guys. Yeah. Think low-hanging fruit.
General cicada.
Oh man, I'm gonna say beetle, dung beetle.
I've never tried a dung beetle.
That would be so brave.
It's a little weird. My favorite insect to eat, Gene, did you want to take a wild guess?
Well, I've enjoyed insects in several places. My favorite was a little vendor in Delgado in Mexico, and I had mesquite bugs, which were just amazing. It's like a soft corn nut, and he served mesquite bug tacos. He also had white ant egg tacos, as well as agave caterpillar. And there's a Zafirros, which is a culinary institute in Mexico City, trains people in cooking insects. And I remember this beautifully sculpted hummus with delicately balanced to the top a deep fat fried agave caterpillar, which it tastes like
I was going to say caterpillar.
Okay, guys, I'm just kind of only a little smudge disappointed in all three
Is it
of you
really
guys.
Cicada?
Because it is the cicada.
You're kidding me.
I was trying to clue you guys in.
You're
think about the lowest hanging fruit.
Look at that.
But I didn't even want to believe it. Like I just didn't want to believe that you're like a bandwagon insect eater.
So if I could share with you some of the discoveries of the actual cicada, if we have time, I could keep this short.
It's up to the other guys.
Okay.
Yeah, but probably we should wrap up soonish.
Feel free to tap me on the screen So what's amazing is that I've been collecting the cicadas through all their life stages right now. So I collected the nymphs, the tendrils, and the adults. And the tendrils are when they molt, go through the last instar, and they from the nymph and before they become an adult. And so what's been amazing is that I also was very misinformed and used my best judgment in how I've been working with insects. I have been cooking with insects now for over 4 years. And so I was interviewed countless times about how to process and cook with cicadas. And I was like, well, you guys know that I haven't yet even eaten a cicada yet. And they're like, well, yeah, but the story is now because it's happening. And this was 2 months ago, which is amazing that it's still in the news cycle. And they're like, well, no, just tell us what you think. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, based on what I understand, I mean, you boil it for a little bit you want to blanch it a little bit, and then maybe bake it to dry it out again and be able to eat it, fry it up, add it to your favorite foods. But you want to boil cicadas, blanch it. Wrong.
Yeah.
Completely wrong.
I can see someone getting worked up about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so erroneous because you can blanch the nymphs. Yes, because they have the way that they're designed. They're living underground. They won't get waterlogged. So they can keep the water out because they could be flooded by water and they could repel the water from getting in. So yes, you could blanch them, and that is a perfect way to make them food safe and then prepare them in further applications. The adults, you put them in boiling water, you know what's going to happen?
They're
going to become not good at all, not recommended at all, because they will liquefy their insides and then they'll become a mushy mess. Like, ew, no texture. You're taking out 17 years of Mother Nature's goodness. They've been feeding themselves with all this goodness, ready for me to eat this deliciousness.
You ruined it, yeah.
And then what? I'm going to ruin it by, I'm going to
What do you want me to serve you a boot? What do you mean?
Right.
Well done.
And then when people are talking about oh, you don't want to eat that squishiness, like dry it out. It's like, oh yeah, like you love eating dried chicken, right?
Yeah.
Like, is that what you're saying, that you want to take this delicious, succulent adult cicada and you want to turn it into mush and then dry it out to basically make it into a beef jerky and then dry it? I mean, it's just like, no, that's all wrong.
When you say it like that, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Thank you, Shane, for agreeing with me. So what's been fascinating is that, so I've already made dozens of dishes, and I'm easily going to make 100 unique dishes with cicadas, easily. And what I found to be fascinating is with the nymphs, they're essentially like these exploding, just meat-filled bugs. They're just so incredible. Sorry, they're not bugs, Gene, Barrett.
Well
they are bugs.
They are bugs.
No, they are bugs, right?
Okay,
yeah, right. Okay, thanks.
So for the audience,
they have the
for the audience, right. True bugs, one of the orders of insects, 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕪, have piercing, sucking proboscis, used to feed on plant juices or blood.
Yes. So the great thing is that I've made them stir fried them. I've added them to kimchi. And interestingly, when the traditional kimchi, you use baby shrimp or oysters and you want to get that umami flavor. Oh my God, what about adding these nymphs to add that flavor? And also it has that texture of the baby shrimp as well. And so you bite into it and it's just squirts. It absorbs all the flavor of the spiciness and the garlickiness, the pepperiness of the kimchi, but then also has all the vegetable goodness. It is fascinating and really a marvel. The adults.
I can't wait.
Yeah, Barrett?
Did you invest in a separate freezer to store it?
I did, yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't. I secured a freezer. I vacuum sealed it so I could have a supply essentially to work with.
You threw a bit of a wrench in my marketing plan with the buy the extra freezer for your insects, but we can work with it.
Well, this is just for someone like me though, because I plan on extensively doing R&D with the cicadas, not only myself but with other chefs and universities to really work in the food science area of this. But I vacuum seal it to remove all the air. And then, so I don't double bag it.
Because
I vacuum seal
it will be 3 years before Joseph comes to stay with me in Wisconsin and experience Brood 13.
Yes, that's right.
For those Wisconsin listeners.
We we do. I was just gonna say we should probably wrap up.
Hold on, I've got two more things to read.
Okay, all right.
Real quickly, I would say the adults. The revelation with adults, they're
Gene started
delicious.
drinking like 2 hours ago. Like, be mindful.
So with the adults, everyone's like, "Oh, don't eat the adults." Okay. They're all like, "Oh, no good." You know what? Maybe learn how to cook with the adults before you say that, then, because adults are incredibly delicious. The wings are also very edible if you know how to cook with them. Someone that I shared it with didn't like the wing so much. That's fine. I understand, maybe not for first-time eaters of insects, but the adults are incredibly delicious. They're very versatile to work with. So I just think really going back to what Barrett said earlier, the only limitation with cooking with insects is with your imagination. I
love the aggressiveness of your insect cooking recipes too. I like the no patience for the noobs trying to figure it out.
No, I think that the time that we had made me rush a little bit and sound a little more aggressive than usual. I think it was. I felt like very on a time limit. So I think that's where the
alcohol makes us all a little surly sometimes. Barrett, read us something beautiful.
So I think it's important to include Margaret Atwood, author of *Handmaid's Tale*. She wrote this in a series of poems.
Such a great show, too, by the way. I wish I liked reading.
Well, let me read for you. So here's her poem titled *Cicada*. Finally, after 9 years of snouting through darkness, he inches up scarred bark and cuts loose the yammer of desire, the piercing one note of a jackhammer vibrating like a slow bolt of lightning, splitting the air and leaving a smell like burnt tar paper. Now it says, now it says, now clinging with 6 clawed legs, and close by, a she like a withered ear, a shed leaf brown and veined shivers in sync and moves closer. This is it. Time is short. Death is near. But first, in the hot sun, searing all day long in a month that has no name, this annoying noise of love, this maddening racket, this admitted song.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's almost, that's a dark take a little bit. You can see I'm trying to get from A to B with *Handmaid's Tale* to Cicada and just where she comes from as a disposition.
In an interview where Margaret Atwood read this aloud, she said that, at least for a brief time, UK's Amazon ranked her book of poetry, including this poem, as #1 erotica poetry. So there you go.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Amazing.
And I think I should also include a poetic celebration of cicadas from the 1st century BCE. Somewhere between actually 1 BCE and 6 CE. Common Era. Ready? This is from the Anacreontia. We know that you are a royally blessed cicada when among the treetops you sip some dew and sing your song. For every single thing is yours that you survey among the fields, and all the things the woods produce. The farmer's constant company, you damage nothing that is theirs. Esteemed you are by every human as the summer's sweet-voiced prophet. Muses love you, and Apollo too, who's gifted you with high-pitched song. Old age does nothing that can wear you, earth's sage and song-enamored sun. You suffer not, being flesh and bloodless, a godlike creature virtually. Cicadas.
Wow. I have to go dry my eyes, but before we leave, first off, I want to thank Joseph Yoon, Barrett Klein, and Gene Kritsky for joining the show. Do you guys want to let people know where to find you and what you do. Barrett, or Gene, why don't you go first?
You can get my new book, Periodical Cicadas, the Brood 10 edition at Amazon. And of course, the website for the app is cicadasafari.org. That's a free app available on Google Play and the App Store. It'll be used for the annual cicadas after the periodicals are gone.
Amazing. Barrett?
You can find me through UW La Crosse, University of Wisconsin La Crosse's site, or Barrett, Barrett, at 𝕊𝕙𝕒𝕟𝕒. Pupating is what a fully metamorphosing insect does going through a pupal stage.
Amazing. And Joseph, I know I have a lot of East Coast visitors. It's the Big Apple. A lot of people are visiting. They're looking for something unique and interesting to do while they're there. Good date night place. Where can people find out more about what you do in Eating Bugs?
Well, first, I'm so grateful to be on the show with you, Shane. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be able to share our message of edible insects. And I'm at brooklynbugs.com, and I have a very robust and active social media where I show lots of different applications with edible insects. I am beginning to resume my public scheduling. And so if you have a university or a museum where you'd like me to come and visit, talk about, share my work, I am available for those upcoming dates. And also, if you happen to be visiting New York, I guess I will make my first official announcement that I will be launching a private dining and catering service to be able to cater your events. And I was actually just getting ready to make that announcement publicly on my social media. But Shane,
well, I'll put this out in like a couple of weeks, so it includes all the links and everything else. So you have all the time to give me all the everything that you want people to know and have everything in order. Yeah,
all the deets. It is really fascinating to be here. I based on what you said, this is your first 4-top.
Yeah,
and that's why it ran 2 hours. 2 hours plus. I
love a good 2-hour episode.
But what a pleasure! Like really, I have an intellectual crush on Gene, and I'm with Barrett, a creative crush, and Shane, I guess you're now my podcast crush. So it's
wonderful. So many crushes. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining me. And thank you, listeners, for being such wonderful, curious people. Find out more in the description below if you're on YouTube, or check out the HereWeArePodcast.com website. And we'll talk with you next week. Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Next week on the show, Athena Activist. The Cheating Cell is her book, How Evolution Helps Us Understand and Treat Cancer. I've had her on the show. This is her 3rd time back on the show. I had her on years ago talking about cancer. I had her on at the beginning of COVID, just like when everything was crazy, and to hear her thoughts on things from someone that studies cancer and other related things that plague the human condition. But this episode that's coming out next week is all about apocalypse scenarios. It's a fun one. So Athena's you may not remember, or maybe you're new to the show, but she's a science communicator herself, and in addition to doing her own research, she's a terrific science communicator with her own podcast called Zombified, where makes science and kind of dark apocalyptic scenarios and stuff sort of fun, and explores the ideas of, like, okay, zombies, what would that actually look like? What is the what is the actual science behind that? What kind of things exist in nature that do actually have zombie-like behavior? We actually don't talk about zombies next week. Sorry, we probably talked about them in the past, but we kind of talked about what our favorite, if we are going to gamble on what will kind of be the downfall of humanity. we chatted about that. Really fun conversation. That's my sensibilities. That's a fun conversation for me. The downfall of humanity, that's what I enjoy talking about for kicks. I like the darkness, and it's so fascinating and interesting and important to talk about and actually consider and prepare for as well. So super cool episode. When I have return guests on, it's because I think their work is incredible, and I think that we have terrific conversations. So anytime you're seeing a return guest, chances are it's going to be a good episode. Next week's is. And your support on Patreon means so much in terms of just so this podcast costs money to make and edit. It takes time and energy to try to put things out on social media and edit highlights and try to grow it. It's a small podcast, I don't have celebrity guests. I don't try to do a bunch of clickbait things. I like hearing about cicadas or something because they're in the news, or just having fun chats with people about a random variety of subjects. So if you learn near as much from this show as I learned from doing it, you can please support it by going to Patreon. It's how I keep this ad free. And it's also, not only does this show cost money, but I cost money. I need food and rent money and that sort of thing. I'm still waiting on hearing back about something before I start planning a tour and doing shows, because I've kind of been holding out for a top option. But now that I'm doing Mind Under Matter, which if you haven't checked out, is a fantastic show. I can't imagine you listen to this show and wouldn't love Mind Under Matter, maybe even like it more. You'll probably start making both shows into your rotation, but check that out as well. And there's a lot of free ways that you can help us out. One, reviewing our shows, reviewing this show. If you haven't done it on iTunes, Stitcher, anything like that, dude, just word of mouth is the number one best thing. If you've learned something interesting and you use it as a conversation topic, or come up with something that gives you some thoughts for work or anything like that, please consider spreading the word to other people who you think might be curious about the things that we talk about on here, and grow this from a grassroots. This is never going to be the biggest podcast in the world or anything like that, but I would like to continue to make improvements. I would like to maybe get a studio now that we can do in-person things again, because now that I've scaled up and added video and everything else, I want to see what we can do in terms of really upping the quality and everything. So I believe in this this show just because I just love I believe in science, and I love getting to learn about it in this way, and I hope you guys do as well. So very much appreciate all of your support. And those of you that listen all the way to the end, you are, of course, my favorites.